one of the fictions that they use in school is the thing called a simple cell. We now know there is no such thing as a simple cell. That's a fiction that Darwin, in good conscience, probably adopted because he didn't know better, but today we know that's a naive statement. Michael Denton, in 1986, the Australian evolutionist, published a key book on this. He said, although the tiniest bacterial cells are incredibly small, each is in effect a veritable micro-miniaturized factory containing thousands of exquisitely designed pieces of intricate molecular machinery made up of 100 billion atoms, far more complicated than any machine built by man and absolutely without parallel in the non-living world. The simple cell, it's unparalleled complexity, and it has an adaptive design. It has a central memory bank, central library where the information is held. It's filled with assembly plants and processing units. It has repacking and shipping centers. It has robot machines in the form of protein molecules that typically consist of about 3,000 atoms in three-dimensional configurations. And there are hundreds of thousands of different types, specific types of these things. It also has an elaborate communication system with quality control procedures and repair mechanisms. It even can muster armies to attack invaders. So if you were going to make a model of the simplest cell, and we're going to make this model 1,000 million times larger than real, each atom we're going to say will be about the size of a tennis ball. We're going to make this big model. We're going to take, each atom will be represented by a tennis ball. We'll need 100 million atoms, 10 to the 13th. If we could pull together one per minute, it would take us 19 million years to assemble those tennis balls. The model in doing this would be over 10 miles in diameter, so you get the feeling what we're up against. The actual cell has a plasma membrane which has gateways for exchanges. It has signal receptors so it can get message traffic. There's a cytoplasm, which is a fancy word for when we don't know what it's made of. We have a nucleus, which is the information center, and that's where the master library is that everybody else will consult. Inside there's the nucleus, which is the automated factories, and that's where they do the product manufacturing. Then you've got these power plants, which provide the energy for the city to work. It's like a miniature city. And then you have the Golgi apparatus, which processes, packages, handles the shipping, and prepares for export. And then you have all these little vesicles which storage, transport, do trash disposal. They all have functions. This is a veritable city. Now, we have robot machines, hundreds of thousands of different types, artificial languages and decoding systems. We have memory banks for information storage. We have elegant control systems for regulating the automated assembly of the components. We have prefab and modular construction going on. And we have error, fail-safe, and proofreading devices for quality control. We have devices go around and check to make sure it's right. If it's not, it rejects it. Now, let me give you an example. I was at Ford Motor Company. I was an executive at Ford for 6 years. And one of the proud facilities of the Ford Motor Company in Dearborn is the River Rouge plant. It's very famous for lots of reasons. It happens to be the largest integrated manufacturing plant in the world. You have raw limestone, iron ore, and coal go in one end. In the plant, they make their own steel. They make their own paint, their own glass. They have automated plant, part of the plant that makes the engines. Anyway, the raw material goes in one end, and new cars drive out the other end. And it builds these, it's also interesting to watch because they're building a mix, have different kinds of cars and different colors all on the same line. It's all been, it's incredibly, very complicated plant. I think there's 97 miles of railroad in the plant. Huge facility. It's worth the tour if you're there. In fact, it's broken down about 2 or 3 tours. You always want to see the assembly plant. You have a choice of either seeing the automated engine plant or the steel mill. The engine plant always takes you, but there's nothing to see. There's nobody there. It's all automated. It's an automated engine plant. But the reason I mention this, once you've seen that, I can make the statement that the simplest cell is more complicated than the River Rouge plant at the Ford Motor Company. And that sort of gets it across if you have any feeling for that sort of thing. The cell is unequaled in any factory on the planet Earth. It's after having said all that, it's capable of replicating its entire structure in a matter of a few hours. When the time comes, there's a choreography that takes place where it will duplicate itself in a matter of hours. There's no way. if you had 1 million employees. You could do that to the Rouge plan. And all cells derive from other cells. That's very important. Any fishermen out here? I want you to take this challenge. I want you to imagine that you had 2 strands of monofilament fishing lines 125 miles long, and you're going to roll all this up and store it inside of a basketball. Okay? But here's the rub. You want to set this up so you can unzip it, copy it, and restore it on spools at 3 times the speed of an airplane propeller without tangling. Set aside all the coding and all the intellectualese about the DNA. Just let's talk about the physics of it. If we do this in the scale of a basketball at 125 miles a line, can you imagine trying to figure out a way to scroll up all that line into that basketball, knowing that very, very frequently, several times a day at least, they're going to want to come and copy the information that's on that fishing line. So you've got to unravel it, copy it, put it all back again, and do this very quickly. Astonishing. Do you know what library is read more than any other library on in the planet Earth? You. Your DNA in each of your cells is read over and over every time they multiply. All kinds. Whenever it needs to make some manufacturing equipment, it goes to the master library, makes an RNA copy. We'll go through all that in another session. But incredible stuff. But here's the other thing. There's a mitosis mystery. If the initial cell divides into you look through a microscope in school, you see a little cell, it divides into 2. Mitosis takes place, you now have 2 identical ones, right? Then the 2 become 4. 4 become 8. They're all identical. But then you keep watching it, and something very strange happens. As it starts to get bigger and bigger, a dark line starts to form. And you realize that ultimately becomes the backbone. And you discover these cells are doing something strange. They're no longer splitting as duplicates. They start specifying. Some become cortical tissue. Some become muscular tissue. They start becoming all these different tissues which become different organs. Well, there's a very profound problem here. I want you to see if you can relate to this. Let's imagine everyone in this room could play every instrument in an orchestra. You had that skill. Let's assume you had every instrument that was necessary in the orchestra. And let's assume I gave you a copy. Gave you each a copy of the entire orchestration of a symphony. Would we have a symphony? Why not? There's something missing, isn't there? All of you have all the information you need in that copy I gave you. You have access to the instruments you need. You'll discover somebody has to conduct. Somebody has to choreograph the thing, or put it another way. It says, you're going to be first violin. You're going to be percussion. You're going to be whatever. Somebody, it may be arbitrary, it may be all equal skilled. Somebody still has to say, you're going to do this. There has to be a conductor. The fact that there's a single cell with all the information you can imagine in the cell doesn't explain life. Some of the experts have convinced me that God is personally involved in every cell division. Can you handle that? Because they all require an external input. You see, you can have all the information, you can have all the material you need, you still don't have a symphony. Somebody has to orchestrate. If you 2 are the first 2 cells and the first 8, somebody finally says, okay, you guys are going to be this, and you guys, someone's got to conduct it. Interesting. So anyway, who decides the specialization? In the computer industry, we call that conflict resolution logic.